Shalom everyone. The previous session we started with this number and we moved the chairs forward, and then people came in and we moved the chairs back. So we'll wait with the chairs, but I think we should get started. I'd like to start with two extremes that meet. Two extremes that meet in the sense that they both will not discuss sexuality. One, because it's not proper to discuss it, and one, because we don't need to discuss it. We know everything already. We don't have anything to teach us. And I'm just throwing that out now as an opening, and we'll get to it a bit later. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss a little bit the question of should we or should we not discuss this. If the conclusion will be we shouldn't, then we'll end early. You may have guessed if I initiated raising this issue that my opinion is that we should discuss it, but we will try and understand the different opinions. I would like to then give some pointers about what is important and what can be done and what are the responsibilities, the special place that teachers, educators can have on this issue, and then also to give a bit of a Jewish perspective, also general and also Jewish perspective on what we as educators can give on this issue. I would like to say right now that I am aware that this is a very diverse conference and a diverse audience, diverse lecturers, and there are people here of different religious beliefs, attitudes, and that's fine. On the one hand, I will try to be very open and respectful to everyone's beliefs. On the other hand, probably some of what I express, even if I'm not saying a Jewish perspective, will have something to do with my own outlook and my own beliefs in hashkafa. But I believe that it is also relevant and significant, and others can take points from it, even if we don't agree on every single point. Towards the end, I'd like to bring a few Jewish sources. I have them here, but I'm not giving them out now. I'm saving that for the end. Some Jewish sources as examples of how Jewish sources can be relevant, Jewish sources from thousands of years ago can be relevant in today's open society to dealing with these issues, and then some points of closure. So let's get on our way. One, let's say, what are the possible reasons why people came here today? Either you're here because you object to my raising the issue and you want to express that objection, so now is the time, or be silent forever. Oops, wrong religion. You may not be sure. You may think, I want to hear about it. Should we? Shouldn't we? You may want to hear different ideas. We may want to come together and be enriched by one another and be able to help one another on this issue and experience how we as educators can help others. Also, I must say, it's whatever we do today in 60 minutes, 10 of which are gone, so 50 minutes left is obviously not enough. It's a taste of what can be done. I will say in my concluding marks something about a certain committee that I'm part of in Israel dealing with this issue, and we've gone a long way. So I believe that a lot can be done and is being done around the Jewish world. But if today what we get is a little bit of a taste and belief that an experience, double meaning of experience, also to experience it and also to have some experience that we can do this, and you go back to your schools and say, let's see what we can do more about this, I believe that that's a valuable achievement if we can achieve that today. So before I go any further, I would be happy to hear if some of you, in a very short words, just to say something in half a sentence, if a few people could share with us whether you think it should not be discussed, or even if you say there's an aspect of why it should not be discussed, or why you think we should discuss the issue of sexuality as a group of educators and then with our students. So who wants to say something? Bakasha.
I think we have to talk about it because the kids are talking about it anyway. And particularly, even when we were kids, pre-internet, the kids were talking about it anyway. Much more so now, when everybody's got their smartphone. If we're not going to educate them, then the internet will.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think as Jewish educators, we want our kids to see their whole lives affected by Judaism and, specifically Torah and what I do. And I think kids think that religion and sexuality are two distinct, good, bad, black, white, and being able to show them that actually, just like everything that we have in the world, it can be,
Thank you.
I think it's also a pathway of actually showing them the greatness of Judaism, because I think kids are most aware of how empty sexuality can be because they're so overexposed to it, and by giving them how meaningful it can be, you actually create interest in Judaism as a result.
Interesting. Thank you. One last remark, thank you.
I think that I think it's important to discuss because just like anything, establishing a mature dialogue with a lot of depth to it shows them that it's something to be respected and engaged in, and not pushed to the side and kept secretive in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Now it's up to me to say why not. Everyone here was positive. Well, you're here. But I will try and explain a little bit why not. Of course, the simple understanding is this is very private and it should not be public. It should not be discussed publicly. Discussing sexuality publicly is inherently immodest. So in a certain sense, discussing sexuality with our students is giving in to a certain push, or an unjustified push, that they're pushing us to cross proper limits and we're giving in to them. Rather, we should educate them that this is private and it should remain private. Some rabbis think that the fact that we're discussing this here is part of the problem and not part of the solution. Mm-hmm. Just recently, a leading prominent rabbi in Israel was quoted with a very interesting quote. I have to say as an introduction that he and his wife teach sexuality to religious couples. They give a whole series of workshops and guidance to religious couples, but not to students at a younger age, and he thinks it's not right to do that. He said that discussing sexuality with students is like throwing a ball out on the court, and his comment was, Yetzer Hara is going to take a rebound and score a basket and win. So if you put it out there on the court, Yetzer Hara is going to win and we're going to lose. So that's an interesting perspective that he said. He said better leave it and not dwell on it because we can't win in that sense. Teachers and grown-ups in general find it difficult to discuss this with young students, with young children. Parents, who really, I believe, should be the main educators of their children about sexuality, find it most difficult, even more than educators, maybe because with parents and children it's so close and personal. So I can understand, and on the other hand, that gives us as educators, we're not as close as personal, it gives us an opportunity and the responsibility to discuss this with our students. My own opinion, I will share my opinion in a moment, and many rabbis share this opinion. Just beforehand, I want to say something else. Maybe discussing sexuality publicly in a group makes some people uncomfortable. I will say it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. What should we do? Should we say, I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to shy away from it? Or should we give that discomfort its place? I'm not saying I should skip over it, overcome it, and I will have no more discomfort. Maybe I can give that discomfort its place and at the same time move on and discuss it. In Tanakh, in rabbinic literature, sexuality is there, it's present, it's discussed. It's not limited in content, but rather it's very careful of its use of words, of its use of language and attitude. So it's not to discuss it, but it's how to discuss it. And therefore the feeling of discomfort can be a certain sense of Eilu va'elu divrei Elohim chayim, of saying, no, we shouldn't shy away from it, but yes, the feeling of discomfort can be even a positive aspect of saying, okay, leave that discomfort present and make sure that we don't cross certain lines. So I'm not going to decide not to discuss it, but being aware of it keeps us within a certain framework which is positive and possibly even valuable. Some of you have already said some of these points. Problems that come up if we don't deal with this topic openly. First of all, they're going to get their knowledge from everywhere else in the world except from their Jewish teachers, except from Judaism, except from Torah, except from Halakha. And they're going to have all kinds of distorted ideas And if they get it all over, they're going to get really very, very distorted ideas of sexuality. And it's very important that we give them a more balanced picture of what's going on. Another aspect is what they think about Torah, and that has to do with something some of you said as well, is the main word that they know about the Torah when they're maturing sexually is asur. Asur. Everything is asur, right? When you're not married, that's it. Everything is asur. So all they know about sexuality is asur, from Yisur Negiah to everything else. And so everything the Torah has to say about sexuality is asur. One day they're going to get engaged, and then they're going to have, you probably have it in Australia as well as we have in Israel, hadrachat kala, hadrachat chatan, and then you have to make that amazing immediate switch, and it's very difficult, and sometimes people have difficulty with making that switch, and growing up with a different attitude, which is positive and has challenges, which is positive and has direction of boundaries and how to do things and what yes and what not, is much better, also in a practical sense, but also in giving them the message of Torah. The message of Torah that sexuality can actually be a mitzvah, is a mitzvah, and not only an isur, is a totally different perspective than just telling them asur, 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 explaining and giving the message that there is a mitzvah, that there is a bracha, and there are limits, and there are boundaries, and there is how, and there are challenges. Yes, there are definitely challenges, is a very important message. I think that if we only give them the isur, we're giving them something that is the truth, but it's not the whole truth. And we need to give them the whole truth of Torah about sexuality. I'm going to move on to some important points about educating about sexuality. I teach myself in religious frameworks, high school and post-high school. And I made a point before coming to meet with, I also work in Ra'anana with teachers in non-religious schools, and we do some things about Judaism together. And I asked one of them, and she brought a friend of hers, to meet with me and tell me what are their important messages in their school when they teach the topic, what are their experiences, because I didn't want to only be relevant in a religious aspect. So I bring along a lot of points that I brought from them. Of course, being positive and having balances and realizing the complexity of sexuality, when we're talking to youngsters, they're growing up. They're only beginning to be aware of their sexuality, of their body developing and so on. They're very curious, of course, which is natural, which is positive, not negative. But we have to be aware of their age and the stage that they're at, of their maturity. We have to be aware in a classroom, in a group of youngsters, that there can be a tremendous variety. You teach a certain grade, they may be 8th, 9th, 10th, or any other grade, also younger by the way. And some are very aware and very curious, and some at this point don't really know what you're talking about. And this can be present in the group of students you're talking to, and it's important to be aware of that. We need to be proactive. We need to initiate. They may not come and ask you questions. They probably will not come and ask you questions. They probably think that you think it's terrible if they come and ask you any such question or want to talk to you about this. So we have to be proactive. We have to initiate, raise it in class, raise it with the students, and be able to discuss with them, make them comfortable discussing with us, and to create boundaries. There are certain aspects or certain forms of discussion that, true, we do not want them discussing it in that way, but rather than say, don't talk about it, we can create, maybe first we have to discuss amongst ourselves, what are our boundaries, what is proper, what is improper, and teach that to them. We need to give them terminology, explain. Maybe we want to use, as I said before, refined language, but at least once they have to know what we're talking about, and give them refined language and a refined attitude how to deal with it, but enable them to come and discuss with us. Students report that very often they are taught facts, but nothing beyond facts. They are taught facts of physical maturing. Maybe they're taught about facts of sexual relations. They are not taught emotional issues. They are not taught relationships. They are certainly not taught holiness, which is part of the headline of this session. So we certainly have to address these issues. Sometimes students report that they have been taught all kinds of pathological aspects, all the wrong things. They've been taught about rape, they've been taught about assault, but they have not been taught about the positive, beautiful aspect of sexual relations. So they've been given something which is telling them what not to do in a negative way, but not saying anything about what is possible, what will be done in a positive way. And of course we need to address issues of things that are very detrimental, such as pornography. But I think if we just create sexuality as something which is a secret and is negative, then we're kind of attracting them to the pornographic aspect of it. But if we give it as something positive at the same time, with the boundaries, with the challenges, with teaching, restraint, and where we can take it in life in a positive way and where wrong, then we have a chance of even explaining why pornography can be negative, can be detrimental, can even cause them damage, not to mention if someone gets addicted. We have to help them be aware of their own needs, identify their needs, to understand sexuality not only as a physical need, also as an emotional need, as an emotional blessing, and to understand other people's needs. I mentioned in the session in the morning that in Israel I read a fascinating article about criminals who are in prison because of sexual offense, who are given opportunities. Some of them, they have to be interviewed, and some of them are accepted to this program and some are not. Those who are accepted to the program go through training to understand. What are they taught to understand? They're taught to understand that when they're abusive, they are hurting someone else. In other words, these people did not understand, they do not comprehend that when they are sexually abusive, they are hurting someone else. They don't see that. They only saw their own pleasure. They said, I didn't do anything bad, I just, I took ice cream for myself, it was tasty. I didn't know it was someone else's ice cream. And they're taught to become aware of the fact that they're hurting someone else. So I think a very major issue of sexuality is understanding our own selves, our own needs, our own awareness, and someone else's needs and awareness is just as important, and understanding emotional aspects is also just as important. We should give them a positive attitude towards sexuality, together with exercising judgment, self-control, restraint, we mentioned before. Body image is very important. On the one hand, we don't want to ignore that. I don't think any one of us ignores that, and it shouldn't be ignored. On the other hand, it has to be healthy and positive and not distorted in all kinds of ways. We have to teach them about their rights, the rights for privacy. We have to teach them assertiveness where that's necessary. We have to give them points about men and women. I don't know if you have all the answers about men and women. What is male? What is masculine? What is feminine? I don't have all the answers. But to be aware of the issue of masculine and feminine, to be aware that each of you has to understand himself and herself, maybe discuss with others in a positive, healthy way, but also that there is someone else out there that you need to understand, that you can understand up to a certain level at this stage in life, and you will be able to understand better at a later stage in life. To learn about love, about the difference between falling in love and loving, which is not the same thing. There are several Hollywood movies we can show them about falling in love. How many Hollywood movies can we show them about love, which is a very different thing than falling in love? And also the difference between sexuality at a young age and between a certain level of maturity. We're talking to, let's say, middle school, high school, even primary school children, but certainly middle school, high school, they're becoming mature. They really are becoming mature. I'm not just saying they think they're becoming mature, they think that they're way ahead of us, that we're way behind. You know the story about the kid who says his parents don't know anything. He was 16, 17, and then he reaches 19 and he realizes that his parents know something. He says, oh wow, you learned a lot in the last 2 years. But even when they are becoming mature, there are certain levels of maturity to try and help them understand that there's a higher level of maturity that's waiting later on, so that they can put sexuality within that higher level of maturity as it comes later on. I'd like to address the issue of teachers. As teachers, I think we need to develop tools and methods to be able to be relevant to our students on this issue. Everything we're discussing today, most of what we're discussing today is theoretical. We need to work on it. We have 45, 50 minutes right now. This is a long-term thing that has to be developed. I will again say something about this at the end, so that as teachers we can meet our students on this issue. I have to say, the people who meet our students most, we are the people who meet them most. We meet them sometimes many more hours than their parents. I don't know when they get home. I don't know when their parents get home, how many hours their parents spend with them. We see them with their peers more than anyone else. Sometimes there are things that students are willing to open up with teachers, not with parents. We have a very special role. I think it would be great if we can give parents tools, if we develop the tools. Sometimes teachers, educators have abilities, educational abilities that parents, without minimizing the value of parents. Parents have other very important professions, they're doing other important things, but sometimes they don't understand the educational tools of being able to guide their children on this issue. Maybe we can supplement, but maybe also we can give parents tools. Again, maybe I'll remember to say, give an example of that later on. But even if not, then to develop the tools for ourselves. We can be sensitive to recognize when something is wrong. When a student is feeling depressed, who knows what it could come from? Is it possible that someone was sexually harassed or even abused? Can we be the ones to notice that and to be aware and to ask the questions and to be able, even if we don't have the professional tools, to direct them to someone who has, or to ask for guidance and advice and help from someone who has the professional tools? Sometimes students are questioning their sexual identity. I will not raise the issue here. It could be a fascinating discussion, and I think it's a very important discussion, but we're not going to raise it right now. What do we do? What are the different opinions in this room? What do we do if a student is having questions about his or her sexual identity? But whatever your attitude is, I believe it's very important that they shouldn't be alone. They may think it's the end of the world. They may think that they're sick. Someone has said to them that they're perverts. Now, I'm not saying that. Someone has said to them they are hurt, they're afraid. They're afraid to ask the question. Having someone who tells them, we're here for you, we're here to help you. Whatever you understand the word help to mean in this context can be extremely important. And sometimes, again, it's easier for the teacher than for the parent. It's easier for the student to open up to a teacher than to the parents sometimes. And different students, as we said, are at different stages, and we can be very significant to them at the different stages that they go through. I want to give some Jewish messages about this, and once again, I want to stress that I want to be very respectful of different people with different opinions and beliefs about this. So what I'm going to say definitely comes from my own beliefs and outlooks, but at the same time, I believe can be valuable for other people, even if they take part of it and not all of it. First of all, the word holiness. We put it in the headline. Not only to educate towards healthy sexuality, I believe, and some of you mentioned it in the opening, that it is also something that we can achieve, making sexuality holy. I believe it's something we should teach. Sexuality is a bracha. It's a bracha from Hashem, it's a bracha from God. I think we have to be grateful for it, to have hakarat hatov, to teach it as such, as something not to be afraid of, as something that we have to thank God for, to have hakarat hatov for this. Certainly, it needs to be directed. It's not a hakarat hatov, it's the same as food. We have hakarat hatov, we're grateful to God for food, doesn't mean that we eat everything we see. That's what kashrut is about. It's similar, very different, because kashrut is much more open. Sexual relations is much more minimalized, but basically it's a blessing, and we need to direct it, to give them that attitude. An important issue, I believe, is to teach sexual relations as part of a relationship. In Hebrew, one of the terms, we all look for terminology. Again, we're trying to refine terminology. We want to talk and remain within certain boundaries. One of the terms, and the term that I appreciate most in Hebrew, is Yachasei Ishut. Yachasei Ishut. Ishut is sexual relations. But when we use the Hebrew term Yachasei Ishut, we are saying something about Ish, Isha, a person. This is not just a physical act, it is a personal act. It has to do with anashim, it has to do with person, with people. It has to do with personality, it has to do with relationships. There is a relationship between two people. Within the Jewish halakha and tradition, this relationship is within a certain framework. It's a framework of commitment between the man and the woman. It's a commitment which is a lifelong commitment, which creates a continuous commitment, which creates continuous growth and deepening in the relationship between these two people, where the sexual relations are part of this commitment and deepening of relationship throughout our lives, and that gives it a very powerful aspect of holiness. I believe that when we come from a Jewish perspective, we come with very powerful and positive energies about sexuality, not negative. Again, what our students very often hear is the negative. They hear negative energies. This is bad. This is Yetzer Hara. How many times do we have to teach them the Midrash at the beginning of Bereshit, where the Pasuk says, Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa v'hinei tov me'od. Hashem saw the world that created, He saw that it is good. Not that it is good, that it is very good. And there are several Midrashim there about what does it mean, tov me'od. One of the Midrashim says, tov ze Yetzer HaTov, me'od ze Yetzer Hara. The world is good, that's Yetzer HaTov. Tov me'od, very good, that's Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer that we call evil, the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, is very good. Just to teach that Midrash is saying there's something here that can be bad, but it can be good. It's a creation of Hashem. There's a lot of powerful, positive energy, positive values. The message that I try to give my high school students is save it. Save it for where that relationship will be a commitment, a lifelong commitment, and that way you can sanctify it. All this is giving positive rather than giving negative, not to teach blame, not to teach something that will be emotionally damaging, something which is threatening. Also, we're not perfect. We are not angels. Another midrash about the angels saying to Hashem, a midrash around in the Gemara, the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, about giving the Torah, the angels saying, why are you sending the Torah down to earth? Leave it with us here amongst the angels. And Hashem says to the angels, are you going to commit adultery? You don't need the Torah. It's human beings who need the Torah. We are human beings. We can be Anshei Kodesh, as the Kotzker Rebbe says. We can be human beings who can be sanctified. But we are human beings. We're not perfect. And if you're not perfect, don't be too heavy on yourself when you're not perfect. Try to sanctify yourself. I'm going to stop at this point. I hope you have a pen and paper or a pencil and paper. I would like to ask you to do the following. To please write down an answer to two questions, and then you don't have to, but I will ask you to share with partners. Please write down what you think is the one short sentence, the one most important message about sexuality. I've said a lot of things. I'm asking you to choose one short, most important message about sexuality that you would want to convey to your children and students. What is the one most important message about sexuality that you want to convey to your children and students? And then two, what creative idea do you have about how to do that? Can you give us a creative idea about how to do that? Let's take a minute for you to be able to write down your answer. Okay. Some of you may have already started doing this. I would like to ask you to group up in pairs, or if you're more comfortable, in a trio, and share your ideas with one another, share your thoughts, and maybe share your creative ideas with one another.
I have ideas. When I have run 3 classes. The games we play. Yeah, help them understand. Yeah, well, that's my message.
I'm sitting there like, didn't want to look. But yeah, and he did. Conversation.
I'm not going to stop you at this point. I just want, if you can, together choose one of those creative ideas and try and develop it a little bit more, one more minute, to be able to share with everyone a creative idea that you all put together as a group.
You already started talking about it as a kid, like, my daughter, like, grabbed me. Talk about it, like, that language, as they get older, it gets more and more sophisticated. But they also got it's also great, instead of like one big blast of everything, it's kind of like, there's a process where you're seeing them acting in certain ways and you say, well, actually, give them a bad
It's still young. You don't know what to make. Probably they want to see something. This is a hard question. What I want to ask
what's the answer? What's the answer? Well, he's saying that in certain ways, depends on a parent. That's a little bit distant. They don't have pictures of day. They can also depends on they really talk to teacher. Also, something they can ask the teacher in a joking way amongst
It sounds like it's more it's relations. Hasn't done scope.
Well, we especially change the set up and you do the whole
Okay, I'm really sorry I have to do this because I think it's great. This is great. I'm sorry that I have to stop these great discussions. Thank you for your cooperation. This was great. If possible, I counted 7 groups or pairs. if possible, we can go around the room. You don't have to, but if you're comfortable sharing shortly the creative or a creative idea that your group came up with, you can say the message and the idea. I would be grateful. Can we start from this trio? Who's your representative?
Well, it was interesting because we had very different ideas, but they all connected, which was like really nice. I don't know your name, sorry. Mel sort of spoke about the fact that teaching students for like a lotus flower has all the different leaves, all the different petals, that each aspect of the petal is a different aspect of our identity, and that our sexuality and our physicality is only just one of them. So if they kind of fill in that whole lotus flower of their whole different aspects of their identity, they'll realize that there's only kind of one part of it, which is their physicality and sexuality. The rest of it is also themselves. And then I kind of connected that to, if you're coming at it from a Jewish studies perspective, I kind of saw it as, if you're teaching v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol ma'odecha, then it's your heart's engaged first, then your soul, and then your body. So if you're talking about a relationship with another person, you're engaging heart, so that's the love, the soul, kind of what makes that person special, that kind of then leads to, okay, and then what do we do physically? So kind of those are the things that I'm thinking.
Thank you. Someone share with us?
When you come to a conclusion, just want to discuss things. Just the pressures of. Why am I leaving close? I'm on 15 minutes sleep, 24 hours. Anyway, forgive me if it doesn't come back clearly. We were just discussing how we have sex education in school that comes from sometimes non-Jewish teachers, and they get one side of it, and we're not giving it to them from the Jewish side of things. And we were talking about STDs and what else? Safe sex and why are we not talking about these things? We spoke about intermarriage.
I guess a message that came out of it is that these sorts of issues should be looked at sort of from a whole school approach instead of one particular discipline. And I think that's something that's good to look at. Because oftentimes one side might get covered, or you might just cover the biological aspect or physical aspect and not an emotional or a psychological, things like that.
I also think boys and girls are different. Girls start yapping about these things at 9 years old, whereas boys start a little bit later.
No,
Girls
that's
are-
not
No, I mean, she said yapping. She said yapping. She didn't say investigate.
I mean, I know it's
Yeah,
days,
but
but
it's
girls'
not
bodies
earlier.
start changing differently, but earlier than the boys do, so they're automatically self-conscious about the way their bodies are changing. So when they reach bat mitzvah, they're already developing an age. And then you talk about tznius. I mean, I do, even with my kids who come from nothing, talk about tznius and respecting your body and peer pressure, and what does that mean, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's actual, being engaged with the other sex or whatever it is, but holding yourself and respecting yourself and believing in yourself that I can say no. If I believe in myself, I don't have to give into the peer pressure. So we do start from, and we spoke about, also talk about mikvah from 12-year-old, from very young. Do we discuss in detail, or do we discuss it on a very basic level of just taking a keli and taking something that's, etc.?
I might address that if I have time a little later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We had an interesting discussion in terms of how kind of you approach the topic without kind of introducing other students to something they didn't know before if it's not necessary, and trying to gauge the students' kind of knowledge on the topic so that you're not kind of overstepping and you're saying things that they're not really knowledgeable about or interested in. So we thought about doing something like a Google form or something like that, where it's all discreet, that the teacher only knows, what everyone's answered on the form, and then you can kind of from there move into a discussion where the person with the least knowledge and the person with more knowledge, and potentially if there have been anyone with any kinds of experiences that might make it difficult for them to actually talk about any of these issues. So it can be done in a kind of private forum, so that when you get to the class, there's no kind of there are no issues that arise suddenly that you have to deal with, that you come to it prepared, and that you set down certain ground rules from the outset, because a lot of the things we were talking about were very difficult to get into if you hadn't done anything to prepare for it beforehand. So really being prepared for something like this and not just having an offhand discussion that just, the students bring something up and you straight away go into it, which is potentially tempting to actually get into the discussion without having been prepared for it.
Thank you.
Well, we spoke about different approaches to teaching these topics. So Tony mentioned, I guess, a more explicit approach to jump in, get rid of the taboos in the room, and just launch into it, which is, I thought, was an interesting approach. I teach a Year 10 class in relationships, and I guess the one, I got the opposite extreme, which is very subtle. Take a source, which they could almost not connect it to. I guess it's connected to relationships, but it's slowly built up. So I guess it's a different approach, and then they'll come to these ideas, and the questions will come from there. I guess after a piece of learning, or I guess more organic in that sense, as opposed to just confronting the issue and bring it out in the open straight away. So I thought those were two interesting ways of approaching it.
Thank you. Sure.
I came in late. We just talked stuff. We talked about it.
Okay.
We had a discussion. It was nothing to do with what you wanted us to discuss.
No.
You're honest.
We were talking about different methods, different ways that how Mr. Epstein, his experiences of like the olden days. No offense.
Don't say Jurassic.
How things were, how things have evolved and changed. Did we get anything out of it?
Well, you can say what we currently do.
Okay, yeah. What we do at Yavna is we base ourselves on Yocheved Dubal. You might know her. So she's consulted with a number of schools around Australia, and so we have like a program that runs from Year 8 to Year 11, where every term it's we address a topic, and it builds. So Year 8 is kind of like more subtle. We're talking about developmental change and self-esteem and relating to the other sex, and then we're kind of going into like masturbation, pornography, premarital sex, yichud, and then at Year 12 we run these sessions on Torah Mishpacha, and we give an intro to how Torah would like us to live as a family, and it's done in discussion format. So we have women teaching girls, we have men teaching guys, in like smallish type classes, not too small, like 15 or so, and we have those conversations. The kids all say it's not enough, which is wonderful.
Thank you.
At Scopus, we're also using. I guess we're doing an amended version of Yocheved's curriculum. We are doing it in small groups but we're also splitting the boys and the girls. That was a big issue for us. So are there times when it's important to actually have boys and girls hearing each other talking about this stuff to help sort of demystify some of it, but also recognizing initially at least. We haven't gotten to that stage yet. We said in theory we're going to have boys and girls talking together, but we haven't really gotten there yet. We're still at the stage where we have them separated in small groups of 6 people, 6 students, and very, very open conversations, which has been great. It's very clear the kids, really appreciate having the space to talk about it. Because what you said about how it's easier to talk with your teachers and people in school about this than it is your parents, because it's suddenly much more heavy, very much reflects what we're experiencing at the school. But we're still sort of struggling with the question of when exactly do we have the conversation where they hear from each other and discuss that.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Our point of view is where I'm teaching is very different from what I heard here. So our school is more pluralistic. So we are very much focusing in acceptance, tolerance with different genders, different tendencies, let's put it that way. So we're not teaching such in the class, but we're teaching in tutor groups, meaning that the tutor group is a well-being from the students. So they will discuss in this. Not such as a theme from the school, though they bring some people talking to them with all the high school about pornography as well and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, yes.
Mhm.
But more than that, we're very open and different for the child to be able to be safe enough and to trust us and to be able to say, okay, I am not this, but I am that. So it's a very much acceptance in the school. So it's a very beautiful type of connection and trust and feel safe about it. So we bring maybe once a month a person that's speaking to them about everything. So the people are very exposed about that, and it's very much more tolerance and acceptance. Now she was talking about the point of view of the little one, so she can tell you more about
I'm
that.
in kinder, and I do talk about sexuality. I think it starts as babies, and I talk to them about the body and what it's called. Not just because I want to go over it, because it comes up. And I talk what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and kissing and hugging, who do you do that with, and if somebody asks you at the shop for a kiss, do you give that, and who's allowed to look at you, and how do you say no to anyone, including even parents. We had an issue a few years ago that there was, not once off, it happens once in a while, that there was a child that was very interested and tried to take children to the bushes and to look and we had to discuss about what's appropriate,
Yeah.
how do you say no, what's unacceptable at that age.
Thank you, everyone. I think, first of all, let's pass these around, please. And while they're passing around, while they're going around, I'll just say a few comments. One is that we heard a lot of different perspectives. I was asking for different ideas, which we also got, but we also heard a lot of different...
Anyone who requires bus transportation, please make sure you have your luggage, and please be at the bus park in the next 10 minutes. Going to Kimberley, Novotel and Cosmopolitan. Also, please remember we have our cocktail and film event tonight at Best Wiseman Centre from 7:15. We hope you've had a wonderful day.
We have 4 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for your perspectives. Rather than myself saying anything additional about what you've said, I think if we all listen to one another, we can learn from one another, which I consider to be very important. I will also say one other idea, and that is that one of the teachers told me, after you discuss things with a group of students, linger around, stay around.
Yeah.
There might be one individual student that was not ready to open something with other students around, who may take the opportunity to come up and talk with you. So just have that in mind. Just to give you an example, we're not even going to have time to go through all of this. You can take it, but I need to explain what we can learn from these. There are two major texts in Talmud about this. One of them is in Ketubot, one of them is in Nedarim. I'll just give a few examples. I'll take the first one, in English, I'm skipping the Hebrew, of course. If a man, the Mishnah in Ketubot, if a man forbade himself by a vow to have sexual relations with his wife, Beit Shammai rule she can demand the divorce after 2 weeks, Beit Hillel rule 1 week. And one of the things that we can learn from this is the discussion in the Gemara as to why the difference of opinions. One of the opinions, the opinion of Beit Hillel, they derive it from the law of the menstruant, who is forbidden to have relations for 1 week, according to Torah law. I'm not getting into halakha l'maaseh today, which is more than 1 week, but the Torah law is 1 week. But what his message is that a man can make a vow not to have sexual relations with his wife for 1 week, because that exists within Torah law. And that can exist within a relationship. The Torah is saying that's possible, that's acceptable. But beyond that, that is not acceptable. You cannot be married and separate yourself from your spouse. Is that the right word? Yes? You can't be married and separate yourself from your spouse and say, well, I'm going to be away, I'm taking a vow for the next 2 months. The spouse can demand a divorce in such a case. Meaning that sexuality, giving the message, is not something which the Torah is pushing to be forbidden. It's pushing to be balanced, but saying no for a week, not saying no for long times. I'm not going into the following story. It deals with students who go away for a long period of time without their wives, and the Talmud reaches the conclusion that it's okay. But then the Talmud tells a story about someone who did, and he would come home every year, Erev Yom Kippur. He would study Torah and come home Erev Yom Kippur, on the eve of Yom Kippur. And one day he didn't, and his wife cried, and where he was studying, the roof caved in and he died. So the Gemara, the story, is contrasting the halacha. So halachically it's permissible, but you have to be very sensitive. So the Talmud is giving us halachic boundaries, but also human sensitivities. You can't do this only within halakha. You have to talk to your spouse and be very sensitive. I'm turning the page. Fascinating, number 2. Number 2 is saying, if a man provides for his wife through a trustee, they don't really live together, he provides for her, she is to eat with him on the night of every Shabbat. Once a week they eat together. And the Gemara discusses what does it mean to eat together. One opinion is it means to eat together, food. The other opinion is it means to have sexual relations. It's a euphemism. But the fact that there is a difference of opinion, is it food or sexual relations, is saying something about relationships. Is the sexual relationship only physical, or do you have to have a meal together and then have sexual relations? Is it just you give the physical need, or is it part of something broader than just the physical aspect of sexual relations? Can there be a difference between men and women here? Things open up here, and the Talmud is discussing it. Number 3 is telling us how not to have sexual relations, and the Rav Yehuda Brandes explains what we can learn from this about what is right, what is the proper way. Very important messages. I don't have time for them. I'd like to go to the last one and just stress that the book of Shira Shirim in Tanakh, the Song of Songs, uses very beautiful and powerful physical descriptions of the attraction of a man to a woman and a woman to a man as part of the relationship between God and man, God and Israel. And the Talmud learns from this what is forbidden outside of marriage. And that's fascinating, because the Tanakh, the Tanakh is using it in a positive way. It's positive within marriage, and it's negative outside of marriage. And that in itself is a powerful message. And we don't have time to study this. You can take it and study it. All I wanted to show you was that if you look for the sources, Jewish sources, ancient sources, have very powerful, relevant, up-to-date messages. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.